Hello from the Heartland. My name is Jenna, and this is Smarter News. News when it matters and why it matters. Our Smarter series features unique people who help us think and live smarter. Michelle, how would you describe the morning of April 15th, 2013?
It was a beautiful day, a beautiful morning.
And how would you describe the evening of April 15th, 2013?
Scared and confused.
What happened in between those 2 points?
Well, I started off my day working out, took my dogs for a walk on the beach, went home. I was puttering around the house, had music on. I was really happy to be going downtown. It was going to be my first time standing at the finish line. Typically in the past, I always stood out in Newton on Commonwealth Ave, less crowded, more space. And that year, I decided to join a group of girlfriends for a little champagne brunch. And one of our girlfriends lived right in Back Bay. And so I got my stuff together, had signs for friends that were running. All of us, between the group of us, we had like 6 people we were tracking. And I headed down to the Red Line, got on the train and headed into the city to meet my friends. And
what you're talking about is the Boston Marathon, which is a huge day in Boston. I think for those of us that maybe haven't experienced it. So it's an amazing day. It marks not only the marathon day, but we're marking an important part of American history, which is so steeped in the city of Boston. Mm-hmm. So this is the setting. You sound like my type of girlfriends, by the way. A little champagne in the morning, celebrating the big day. And of course, it was the day, a historic day in America for another reason as well. It was the day of the Boston Marathon bombing. So I want to pause there because even in the name, sometimes we don't recognize that it was a terrorist attack. And you were one of hundreds of people who were injured. Several died and hundreds were injured. And so I want to connect the dots here between your day, but also from that point to now, where you've really taken this amazing experience. And I say amazing in that you've turned it into this amazing experience to gift other people, to inspire them for random acts of kindness. So we're going to accomplish a lot in this conversation. I'm so glad to have you. And I just want our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So your full name is what, Michelle?
Michelle Leroux.
And so that's French?
Yes.
And
I come from a very big French-American family. Yes.
And where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Maine, in Auburn, Maine, a little mill town that is known for, Lewiston, Auburn, Maine is known for being what they call Frenchville. A lot of the French people came down from France through Canada down into Lewiston, Auburn area to work the mills.
Amazing.
And so I grew up in Frenchville in Auburn, Maine.
And so you came to Boston to go to school. Is that what brought you down south a little bit?
No, I actually went to college in Missouri. So after high school, I was an equestrian and I competed on horseback. So I received a scholarship to this school in Missouri and ended up in Missouri. It's very random. That's very, but I went to school in Missouri. And after college, I graduated and my best friend from high school and I decided to move to Boston. So I've lived here for over 21 years.
Amazing. And so in 2013, you're in Boston. I imagine living a really fun and full life. You have your career going at the time. What sort of industry were you working in?
I work in financial services. I work for the same company I did at the time. And I worked and went out with my girlfriends. I worked a lot. I feel like that was the majority of what I did prior to the bombing.
I think that's the majority of what we all do in our 20s and 30s, right? We're hustling, trying to we got to navigate our way. And so now you're in Boston, you're in this amazing American city on one of the best days to be in the city. And you're able to see on this beautiful sunny day to go hang out with some girlfriends. And the race is fairly long. I mean, for anyone who's run a marathon, I know you have at this time, it's hours long. So somewhere around midday, a little bit after midday,
Mm-hmm.
you all decide to go to the finish line. And that's because you were tracking some of your friends that were running?
Yeah, so we were at my girlfriend's house and we were tracking people, and it got to be a little bit afternoon time, and we were tracking folks, and we were like, we should head down now. So we grabbed our cups and we went on our way.
What's really important about the timing, and I remember this during the broadcasting of this live event, is we were at a point in the race when most amateur runners are looking for their time, which is that you hope to do a marathon in 4 hours. I mean, that means you're running good pace, right? And so that's when a lot of people are around the finish line, because that 4 hours, 4.5 hours is when a lot of, let's say, your friends are pushing for that moment. So I imagine that sounds about on track with how your friends were running that day.
Absolutely. And it was very crowded. Well, by the time we got over there, it was definitely, you could feel that energy that everyone was waiting for their people to come across that line. And it was exciting. I had never been down to the finish line. I wasn't a person that likes large crowds anyway. So that was different for me, but it was exciting. And I very clearly remember saying to one of the girls I was with, I'm so glad we came down here today. And that was probably, if I had to guess, 10 minutes before it happened. And I just think back to that moment a lot.
I'm sure. When was that moment when you realized something's wrong? Something's very, very wrong.
It happened so fast. I don't even think we had time to think. I mean, I know now that Tamerlan was standing very close to me, as he was standing next to the young man behind me in photos.
Tamerlan Tsarnaev, just so people know, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, there's two brothers involved. We might be talking a little bit about. Tamerlan is one, he's the older brother, and Johar, different pronunciations for the younger brother. But Tamerlan is one of the terrorists in this attack.
And he put down the first bomb where we were. And I know now I probably could have touched him if I had gone like this, because we were packed in. I mean, you're touching everyone. But I just remember all of a sudden it just went off, and it was clearly like behind me. And I remember, I don't want to call it a rush, but I remember feeling like this up my back and just smoke and heat. And I remember for a split second kind of glancing up this way and seeing one of the lampposts that was kind of in front of me to my left shaking. And the next thing I knew, I just was covering my head with my arms. And I feel like that's something I learned as a little kid. It's so funny that you covering your head. And I just remember covering my head and just kind of falling forward. And I don't think I ever really all the way hit the ground, but I remember my wrists hitting the ground. So I think I was sort of bent down as I fell. And I couldn't hear anything except ringing. It was like silent, like a creepy, I could not hear. It's like somebody turned the world off on me. And I started to try to get up, and I don't know how long I even stood there when I stood up, because it was so smoky. And I remember just kind of standing there for a second and looking, and the smoke started to clear. And that's when I could see people running, but I still couldn't hear anything. And slowly, it was like somebody slowly started turning up the volume, and my hearing started coming back, and the ringing was so bad. And then I could hear fire alarms. Like, I think all of the buildings behind me, all of the fire alarms were going off because of all the windows blew out. And screaming, just so much screaming. And I don't know, like, it's hard. I remember a lot, but it's hard to remember, like, what order kind of things. It was so chaotic. And I remember kind of looking around me and seeing things that nobody should ever see. Something that looked like I was in Saving Private Ryan or some war movie. And that's when I started to turn around. And when I turned around, it was a lot worse because I was pretty far up towards the fence, maybe like 5 people back. So there were a lot of people behind me. And when I turned around, the first thing I saw was the young man that had been behind my right shoulder, and both of his legs were gone. And I remember staring at him for a moment, and we looked at each other, and I think I froze for a second. And then I started looking around more. And I think the one thing that stands out to me more than even seeing limbs or other things is the amount of blood that there was just, it didn't look real. And I think in those moments, sometimes your mind, you're not supposed to see those things. I'm not in the military. I'm not, I don't even know why I say that. I guess that you think of military folks are the people that see these horrible things. And I don't think your mind knows how to accept it, because I remember looking around and I just kept thinking over and over and over again, this isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. This can't be real. And that's when another bomb went off. And I remember looking over and seeing like a huge puff of smoke and hearing more screams. And that's when I remember thinking, I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here. And I mean, before that, I did look down at my body. I didn't feel anything. That is the craziest thing to me. I don't think I realized I was hurt, because I'm looking around, and then I thought, oh my God, how am I standing up here when all of these people are around me like this? And I looked down, and I remember looking down my right side. I think it's because my purse was hanging, like a crossbody was hanging on my right side. So I just kind of went like this, and there was blood just dripping off my bag. And as I looked down, and then I went this way, and I remember just being like, oh my gosh. And I remember thinking, this is the weirdest thought. I can't get out of this. Because I remember looking down and seeing my leg, like as in, I think I thought I was okay. And then when I saw the injury, I thought, oh my God, I can't get out. I can't get out of this, meaning I can't run away. I'm hurt. And I didn't know I had other injuries. All I saw was that there was a huge hole behind my left knee. And it was just open and big. And I think that's when I was like, I've got to get out of here. There's another bomb. I'm hurt. And I knew I was running for help. I didn't know where I was going. I thought I ran really far, to be honest, but I didn't. I went maybe 20 feet into marathon sports, and I got in there and I just started screaming, someone help me, please help me, please help me. And the next thing I knew, I was kind of falling to the ground. And then all of a sudden it was like people were just lifting me up. They lifted me up and slowly lowered me to the ground. And I was laying on the ground next to the counter in marathon sports.
And these are your civilian heroes at the time that you've talked about. That one of the interesting things that you've spoken about in the past is in that period of chaos and the yelling. And it really struck me as someone who hasn't been through something like you, is that the people that were screaming and running were the ones that weren't as injured. And the people that were injured were having that eye contact with each other, which makes the remarkable story of your civilian heroes all the more important, because they didn't run. They were there with you. So who helped you, and how did they help you?
So their names are Lauren, Joe, and Andrew. And they had relationships with the manager of Marathon Sports, Shane. Andrew worked with him. Joe had worked with him. Lauren was Andrew's, at the time, girlfriend, now wife. And they were in there that day because it was Patriots Day. It was Marathon Day. And, they were all hanging out in there, having a good time, helping people buy things and just hanging out. And Shane and the folks in Marathon Sports, I don't know what some folks would have done without them. Shane was out there pulling people into the store. I remember Shane ushering me in I didn't know him at that time, but I remembered his face because he kind of ushered me in the door as I was stumbling in. And Andrew, Joe, and Lauren, they stayed with me. They put me on the ground and they immediately started. I remember looking up and seeing one of them taking off their belt. And the first thing they did was crank it around my arm. And I didn't really know my arm was hurt. And they cranked it so hard, I remember screaming out in pain. And then they took shirts and tied a tourniquet around my upper left thigh. And they started rolling me over. And I remember going like this and going like this, and there was blood all over my hand, and looking at Joe and being like, oh my gosh, am I okay? Is my face okay? Because there was blood. And I remember he looked at me, he goes, you're beautiful. And I started laughing, and he's a joker, so I know that now. But I remember laughing, being like, okay, thank you. And like, but he was trying to keep me from freaking out. And
you're a daughter of a firefighter.
I am
a career firefighter, a veteran as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of all of this, you have them call your dad, right? And you have this incredible conversation with your father during this time. What was that?
It was Lauren that was next to me at the time. For some reason, I had my phone grasped in my right hand. That thing got through the bombing into the store with me. I did not let it go. I mean, I don't know what that says about me with my phone, but I did. I had my phone and I handed it to her and I said, please find Dad in my contacts. And I don't know how my phone worked. Everybody said their phones didn't work. My phone worked. And she called it and he answered, and I knew it was a bomb, Jenna. And I said, Dad, I'm hurt. I'm really, really hurt. I'm at the marathon and a bomb went off. And I think he was silent for a second. And he said, how hurt are you? And I said, I'm really hurt, Dad. And he said, are there people helping you? And I said, yes. He said, are there first responders? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, honey, I need you to stay awake and stay calm. And I said, okay. And he's like, you hear me? And I said, yes, Dad, stay awake and stay calm. And he said, okay, I'm on my way. I'll be there as soon as I can. I love you, doll. And I love you, Dad. And I hung up, and I remember thinking, please let me see him again. Please let me see him again. Because I didn't know what was going to happen. There was at some point, and I don't know if it was before or after that, but another cop came in and started yelling, everybody out, like screaming it, because they thought there was a third bomb. And apparently, I think these things happen in threes sometimes. So I think that was another thing to it. And I remember grabbing one of my hero's arms with my right hand, reaching over, and I don't remember which one it was. I think it might have been Lauren, and just saying, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me, because I knew I couldn't get up at that point. And I didn't want to be alone. I was so scared. And some firefighters and EMTs had come over and they said, we're going to be right back in for her. And I remember a runner standing over me too, who said he was a doctor. And I don't know.
With a bib, like with a bib,
with
like he had run like a marathon runner.
Mm-hmm. And he had apparently run back in to help. And I think quite a few people did that. I heard stories about that. I think I heard a story about one doctor that ran all the way from the marathon to a hospital to go into surgery. I can't remember what hospital it was, but I remember hearing that story and thinking that was amazing. But I remember a man standing over me with a bib, a runner's bib. And I remember looking up and thinking, what's going on? And he said he was a doctor, and he kind of looked me over and he's like, okay, she's going to be all right. And I don't know if he tightened the tourniquet. I don't remember. But then he asked me some questions and I remember answering him. And then he would look at my civilian heroes and say, she's in shock. And I'm like, I can hear you.
like I'm right here, actually.
I'm right here. But it was very surreal because you are in shock. So are you seeing things the way they are? It's very confusing in those moments. But I remember just over and over again hearing my dad in my head, stay calm, stay awake. And
you did.
I
You
did.
did.
I did.
So you had a tourniquet on your arm, you had a tourniquet on your leg, makeshift.
Yep.
They cut at some point you get to the medical tent, which we talked a little bit ahead of this interview. And one of the things you talked about is that there were some lucky coincidences on that day, including the fact that there were medical tents nearby because you were near the finish line, but they weren't so close that they were damaged by the explosion. And what's interesting, Michelle, is I was looking at this study. Harvard did a crisis leadership assessment of the Boston Marathon bombing. And I was looking at it last night before we talked, and they talked about that being a major factor and that there wasn't more loss of life.
Yes.
And this is something that you very much experienced. Also at the hospitals at the time, there was a shift changeover happening, which means the doctors were kind of passing off to each other, which means there were more doctors in the hospital at the time. This is something else that was very helpful. So you end up getting into a medical tent, and there was a moment. One of the things I have learned from my husband who's been through combat is there is a humanity that comes out that's very almost unexplainable because you're in such a serious situation. But then there's sort of these moments of hilarity that you can't even really grasp. And you had one of those in this tent with a nurse. And I think I think it's important. I mean, these are very serious things, but we're getting the full picture of what was happening. So you get into the medical tent, and then what happens?
They put me on one of those cots and immediately started cutting my clothes off from the bottom. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, they're taking all my clothes off in here. And mind you, the company that I work for is like the major sponsor of the marathon. So a lot of the volunteers are my coworkers. So there are a couple of funny things in here. I think back to it now, I'm like, my gosh, do I have a dark sense of humor? But you're just trying to get through, I think. And they started cutting my clothes off from the bottom up. And when they got to my bra, I was like, no, that's a new bra. And they cut right through that thing. And I was laying there thinking, oh, I just got that. And the nurse started laughing. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, like, yeah, I know. And then
it's very hard to find a good fit. I mean, I can understand it sometimes, but considering the situation, I know. Yes. But I could imagine all those things going through your head because it is. I mean, I talk about being vulnerable, right? How could you not be more vulnerable than in that exact moment? Yeah.
And then I remember they then took a bucket, I think it was iodine, and poured it down the whole side of my body. And then I said, can you please cover me up? Because all I was thinking was, what if someone sees me? I mean, why am I thinking about this stuff as I'm laying there? It is funny now. And I, in those moments, I think it helped me get through, honestly.
Right.
And
well, it's human nature. I mean, it's just a natural thought to have, even though you think it's hard not to judge, it's hard to judge yourself in that moment. But, were you in a lot of pain at this time, Michelle? Because you're still in shock. And now, we're a little bit delayed from, but some minutes have passed since the initial blast. So how are you feeling?
The pain started. I started feeling pain as I was laying there. I don't know how long I was there. They tagged our wrists, and I think it had our injuries on it. Like I remember seeing open blast fractures on it, which I didn't have fractures. I just had open blast wounds. But I remember seeing that on the tag, and I think they might have been colored. I'm not sure to know who was the most urgent that needed to be taken out. But it wasn't that long. I was loaded into an ambulance. And I was laying on the stretcher, and like one of the photos I sent to you, that's actually, I believe, when I was being taken into the ambulance. And you'll notice my eyes are closed. I kept my eyes closed a lot. I didn't want to see anything. And I was trying so hard to stay calm. And when I got into the ambulance, excuse me, there was a young girl in there, Eliza, who's a very good friend now. And she was crying. She was sitting on the bench, and she was so scared. And so was I. But she was a lot younger than me. And I remember just thinking, my goodness, like this girl, and I just kept saying, we're going to be okay. We're safe. They're going to take us to the hospital. We're okay. We're away from it. Nobody can hurt us now. And I know I was trying to calm myself down too, because at that point on the way to the hospital, I was in an extreme amount of pain. And I remember making some more jokes in the ambulance because Massachusetts is known for having a lot of potholes. And when you have an injury on the back of your leg and you're going over potholes, it's not so great feeling. And so I remember saying something too, and one of the ambulance guys that was out back, he looked just as freaked out as we did, Jenna. And I remember I made him laugh. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really weird. He even looks scared too. And same feeling when I got into the emergency room. They got us to the hospital and they rushed us in the emergency room, and everybody seemed very quiet. And looking back now, I'm thinking maybe they were all scared. They didn't understand what was going on either. It just happened, and all these people are being brought in with these wounds that they might not be used to treating. And I remember one of the first things she asked me was, when was your last tetanus shot? And I just looked at her and said, I need one. And she said, okay. And then I just kept saying, am I going to lose my leg? And she was like, you're going to be okay. And I was like, that's not an answer. Am I going to lose my leg? And everybody that came in, Jenna, that's all I kept asking, am I going to lose my leg? And I think in my head, because I saw people without limbs, I thought maybe that's what was going to happen to me. I don't know what I thought.
What are the injuries that you had once you were assessed?
I have an open blast wound to the back of my knee, which basically took all of the soft tissue and the skin about this big from the back of my knee, which had to be skin graft closed by taking skin off of my thigh. I had shrapnel in my thigh, some that worked its way more to the surface as 2013 went on, and I had to have it removed. And then my arm was torn open. I think it happened when I covered my head with my arms. I think what happened is my arm was up like this and stuff must have gone by me. And because I think the blast came through my girlfriend and I. And my arm was actually cut to where there was a huge flap. The skin was just hanging in my armpit, and all the skin near my elbow, near my artery, was all just blown out.
How long were you in the hospital for, and how many surgeries did you end up having?
I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and the first week I was in the hospital, I had surgery every other day. So I had 3 surgeries that first week. I had surgery the night I went in, which I think lasted about 7-8 hours. And then I had surgery 2 days later on that Wednesday, and then 2 days later on that Friday. I was hooked up to quite large wound vacs on both my leg and my arm. And they had to take skin all off my thigh to close up my arm and my leg. So
when did you see your dad again? When did he finally make it to you?
He made it there. He was there the next morning. And I know that my stepmom told me that they drove down the entire way in complete silence.
But he got to you.
He did.
But he got to you. Yeah.
He did. And that was what I needed.
So as we were talking about, in the middle of this chaotic situation, you're handling surgeries, you're looking at your injuries. The day of the marathon, you were wearing your hair in like a top bun, mm-hmm. Michelle, mm-hmm. and that actually became an evidence collector of some sort. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all think the top bun is something that we just throw up, when we just need, but it connect the dots on that one for us.
The morning after the bombing, that top knot was still in, and it was sideways and weird. And I remember just pulling it out with my right hand, and all of a sudden little balls started rolling down my gown. And I was looking down, I'm like, what is this? And my hair's very thick, and I started like shaking it, and a few of them came out. And I was so confused. I started laughing. I'm like, what is going on? And one of the nurses, she goes, oh, hold on, Michelle. And I was like, what? I think she knew. And she went and got a little cup and she collected them. They were BBs from the pressure cooker. I knew I got hit with BBs. I had marks on my back and stuff, but my bun caught a lot of BBs.
So your bun is the holder of evidence. And it's again, sort of this, who you can't even imagine the situation, but these pressure cooker bombs that were created in mm-hmm. the home of one of the terrorists mm-hmm. held all sorts of different things. And some of those little items, right, were what wound up in your body, but also in your hair.
Yes. My understanding was it was just scrap metal, like any kind of metal, razors, nails, BBs, and the BBs were in my hair. Yeah, it was.
I've seen different numbers, and this is because I've skipped around in my research over several years of this about how many the official number was injured, Michelle. And I think the last number I saw was more than 260, and that there were 3 people who lost their lives. Is that the official number, or is that?
I know it's 260 something. I don't know, because I think there may have been some added to it. I'm not positive whether. I feel like 263 is in my head, but I'm not sure. Yes, 3 people passed away at the marathon. And during the chase, there was an MIT police officer killed. Those 4 during that week. So, yes.
And one of those 4 was a little boy.
Yes.
A little boy.
The bomb was put down right next to him. Yes.
When you left the hospital, were you able to walk? Were you able to do normal things? Or what was the recovery like after the hospital?
So I wasn't allowed out of bed for anything because of my leg and the skin grafts. And so not even to use the bathroom. So unfortunately, I had a lot of atrophy. Because I had to wear a brace on my leg to keep the skin graft stretched out as much as I could. So I wasn't allowed to bend my knee. And so they brought me in this room and taught me how to walk upstairs so I could get into my house. And, it was really scary. I went home with one arm that was usable. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even take a shower. And I wasn't allowed to take a shower, but I couldn't have even if I wanted to. And it was incredibly scary. It was going home to a house that was not equipped for how I was. And I didn't know how I was going to get through that.
But you did.
I did.
And you ended up doing quite a recovery that led you even to come back to running.
Through that summer, I did a lot of physical therapy. And I was determined. I want to say I've not been angry about what happened to me, but as far as physically, there was something it did to me that was like, yeah, you're not taking this away from me. And I don't know where I pulled that from. I'd like to think maybe it's from being a horse girl. Horse girls are kind of tough, but that part made me mad that they were taking away. I couldn't even walk my dogs. And so I worked very hard that summer. I did everything my PT told me to do. I went from the walker to the cane to walking by myself. It wasn't easy. I had one day where I went out without my cane because I wanted to, and I fell, and there was nobody to help me up, and I hobbled home, and it was really scary. But I kept going. And by September, I was going back to the gym, and I started going on the elliptical and walking on the treadmill, and it was awesome. And later in the fall, the Boston Athletic Association reached out to the survivor community, and they offered us marathon bibs and BAA 5K bibs. So every Patriots Day weekend, marathon weekend, there is the Boston Athletic Association 5K on Saturday and then the marathon on Monday. And usually people are at the Red Sox game that weekend too. And so my civilian heroes and a lot of my friends are runners. I was never a runner, Jenna. I would have won the lottery before I ran a marathon. There's no way. And they talked me into the 5K, and I thought, okay, well, I can do a 5K because I'll just walk it, But over the course of the winter, in doing it, the trial started, and things, things were being pieced together to get that stuff going. And I think paying attention to that gave me more drive to try harder. There was something about that just made me push harder. And so April of 2014, I ran the entire BAA 5K with my civilian heroes and all of my friends. And I crossed that finish line, and it was surreal and amazing. And it was such an incredible accomplishment. And the running.
Is that finish line the same as the finish line in the marathon that you were at the previous year? Have they kept the finish line still there, still in that same area?
There. just gets repainted every year. Same one. And yeah, I crossed it. And there was something about that feeling and just accomplishing that 5K and realizing that it was actually helping me to run with my anxiety. I had a lot of, it was very hard for me it still is now. I mean, if I'm honest, the PTSD and the anxiety from going through something like that is almost more difficult than the physical part of it. And there was something very empowering about running that 5K. And it also helped me with my anxiety. And so I kept running. And that fall of 2014, we were offered marathon bibs again. And I thought, all right, let's do it. And that's when the trial stuff started in the spring of 2015. So I would go to the gym and run on the treadmill, usually on my lunch break. And because I worked from home even back then, and I would watch this stuff come up on the news, and it made me run harder.
You mean the court trial?
Mm-hmm.
So let me just pause there, because I'll just pick up a little bit from the other, I want to say the legal side of the story, but we mentioned the two terrorists involved, the Tsarnaev brothers. One dies in the course of this manhunt police chase that ensues after. Another one survives. He's 19 at the time, goes through a trial. The death penalty is sought. He's convicted and sentenced to death. In the course of this, the last several years, there's been many changes or things that have that has surfaced legally. And the latest thing is that there was a ruling that the jury wasn't properly vetted that sentenced him to death. And so the death sentence was taken away. However, the federal government appealed that. And now the Supreme Court this year will be looking at the case to see whether or not the death penalty can still stand or what may happen. Do I have that about correct? I'm sure you follow this much closely than me. I'm just giving kind of the cliff notes of it. But it's important to know that one terrorist, convicted terrorist, remains in prison for this, multiple life sentences, as well as a death sentence at one time, but that has been removed and there's some controversy over it. How do you feel about that all now, Michelle? I mean, this has been years, obviously 8 years almost to the day of this event. When you see the headlines about the terrorist that is responsible for so much pain and death, what do you think about that?
I have conflicted feelings about the death penalty. However, in this case, I hope that they keep the sentencing as is. After seeing what he did and knowing what he did, I feel that it's justified in this situation. And I don't personally feel, and I know people have different opinions of that, and I respect that, but I don't feel that sets a good precedent for terrorists.
There's all sorts of questions about how terrorists should be handled in U.S. courts and what that actually looks like. And there's a lot of interesting nuance to this story about these brothers. But that's for another day. It might be something that we look into so people understand some of the legal process here, because how we confront evil and how we handle it in the justice system is always something that is an important story to watch. How was it to watch the trial, and how did you then take the energy from that into your running and to your now work that you do?
Well, it's funny because at the time we were allowed to go to the trial, and I was going to the trial and I had planned it. I was going with someone a few times and I backed out every time because I thought, what am I going to gain out of this? I don't think that I was prepared to go either. I would go now because I'm stronger in myself, and I'm not the same person, but I'm a lot stronger than I was in 2015 when that was going on. And I did, though, take a lot. That trial gave me a lot of strength when I was running, because that's where I started feeling like, no, I'm going to do this because you damaged my body. All I did was go to the marathon to cheer my friends on. Why did this happen? And, I continued to go through surgeries in 2014. And it's like, I've had 8 surgeries. And so when you're going through that, it's really hard to accept that you were just standing in a crowd watching a marathon. It's very hard to accept that. And so I think I pulled strength from watching that, and it helped me run. And I don't know, maybe some people understand that.
How was the marathon when you did it?
It was really difficult and really amazing. It rained that day, so that was fun.
Oh, I remember that year. I had a friend where it rained that year. It rained the whole race, right?
It did. Well, that was a couple of years later, the really bad rain. It did rain the whole race, but it was a little bit warmer than 2018, which was torrential downpours. If your friend ran it that year, I'm so sorry. They need a redo.
Well, the fact that you were able to do that, I mean, with the injury and also considering what you've been through, as you're talking, there's a couple things that I want to make sure that we talk about one Boston Day, because what you've been able to do is take these lessons that you've learned in this experience and channel it towards a really good cause that we can all participate in every April 15th. Doesn't cost any money. All it is collective good energy. And that's great. So I want to talk about that. One of the things that is coming up as you're speaking is how familiar you are with resilience. And here you went through this terrorist attack, you survived. And probably in your life, you never imagined that would ever happen to you. And for all of us, none of us probably thought a global pandemic would happen to us either. There's all these different levels of challenges, but we all have these lessons and resilience to learn. And I'm wondering, what did you learn about resilience, coming through this time? And now you've been through this pandemic too. What are some of the lessons that you've learned that you think are really key to maintaining that resilience and making sure that you don't lose it?
I think probably one of the biggest things for me is that I didn't want to sit in my anger or my sadness or the bad feelings about what happened to me. And I knew that I had two choices. I could find the silver linings in what happened to me, or I could sit and pitch a tent in this confusing world of being a terrorism survivor. And that wasn't a good option for me. And so I started being grateful for the things that I was finding through this, the friends that I was making. I have met the most amazing people because of what happened to me. And it's so hard to say that I would probably go through it again, because I can't imagine these people not being in my life. And you have to find your silver linings in whatever situation you're in. Even now in a pandemic, this has not been easy for anyone, but there are silver linings. There is time with your young kids at home that you might not have gotten if you were going to the office every day. There is a new appreciation for hugging your family members. You have to find those things, or else you're just going to sit in your sadness. And I think sometimes it's a practice. You have to practice it. It's not easy to always try to find the positive or the silver linings. You have to be very conscious of it, and you have to really look for it sometimes, but it's there. And, what is that saying? Like, was it Mr. Rogers that said, look for the helpers?
Yes.
There's always helpers. There's always good people. There's always something you can find to be grateful for. And that's sort of where I am with.
Well, and one way we can connect with you on that level and to kind of help, again, channel this energy that you've used to connect with other terrorism victims all around the world, something that you've done in the past several years, is to mark One Boston Day. So tell us a little bit about what that is and what it requires, or what you would like, how would you like people to participate in it?
Well, One Boston Day is a day to give back. It is a day of random acts of kindness. It is a day where we don't want to focus on the bombing. We are not just sitting around and feeling sad on this day. We are lifting people up. And that could be anything from texting a friend that is having a hard time, or like my son and I are going to bring donuts to the firehouse up the street, or it could be donating to your favorite charity. It could be taking an elderly person for their groceries or to get their vaccine. could be whatever you want that you may give a smile to someone else. And it's an important day. And I feel like everybody needs one Boston Day, not just Boston. This is a day where everyone can participate and not just honor the survivors and victims of that day, but also to just bring a little more happiness into somebody else's life. And I
Speak
think that's
about
amazing.
What does it mean to you when you see people do their random acts of kindness and they hashtag, One Boston Day or Boston Strong. What does that mean for you personally?
It makes me smile because I don't want that day to just be where we talk about the people that did it or that we feel sad, because we do inevitably feel sad that day. This whole week feels strange and heavy. And I think it brings a little more brightness for me personally into that day. And especially with a 4-year-old who now understands that mommy has, injuries on her body, doesn't really understand what happened. He's young, but he knows something happened. And I get to teach him now by using One Boston Day that just because something bad happened to me doesn't mean it has to become who I am. And we can take what happened to us and turn around and do good things for others. And I think that's a really important lesson to teach him. It teaches him resilience. It teaches him that his mom didn't just sit there and feel sorry for herself or, live in the sadness of that day, because it's very easy to do that. And I want to teach him that that's not what his mom did.
We use the word terror to describe a terrorist attack for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. But very few of us have confronted real terror. And yet we use the words like good and bad or evil and good very casually in our lives, to talk about all sorts of things now, politics, anything. It's like we're really quick to categorize, but you've actually seen real evil up close. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that and how that's impacted your life and the way that maybe you see your framework for the world, and also how it's impacted your faith.
I would say regarding my faith, I think my faith actually helped bring me more peace. I wouldn't say my faith has changed at all. Maybe it's a little stronger, but I do believe that brought more peace back into my life. Seeing what happened, I have a hard time when the word terrorism or terrorist is used so casually. I feel like we overuse it and water it down. What I saw was a true act of terrorism, and it has made me very cautious in this world. I definitely look at things different. I have a loss of innocence, so to say. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's also shown me through the people that I've met and what happened after the bombing that there are inevitably way more good people out there than bad. And that is one thing that is so important to remember in something like this, because there are not, thankfully, a lot of those people. It happens, and it's sad, and I hate seeing it continue to happen. But I do believe that the majority of people in this entire world are good. And I try to focus on that a lot, because I do get scared, Jenna. It's you do live with a different mindset after going through something like that. But in good ways and bad, you may live with a little more fear, but you also have more compassion for people, and you also see more good because you're looking for it. And that's kind of nice that I feel like I have more compassion for people, and we need to meet people where they are in life and be kind. And it doesn't take a lot.
That's really good advice. As you're marking this 8th year since the terrorist attack, tell people exactly how they can support you for One Boston Day. What exactly do they need to do? And what is one thing that you would like to leave them with that you feel has made you a little bit smarter because we're Smarter News, about kind of this world that we're living in right now?
So people can participate. They can go to onebostonday.org and take a look at there are guidelines and some ideas on there. And it also has other people's random acts of kindness on there. They do their random act, take a photo, or they don't have to take a photo. They could just make a post on social media, any of their platforms, and hashtag #OneBostonDay. And all of those random acts of kindness will filter onto the onebostonday.org website. So you can go on there and see what everybody's doing, and it'll make you smile, because there's a lot of good that goes on that day. And it would be amazing if there were people on there that are outside of Massachusetts, outside of New England, that maybe recognize that day and make somebody smile, buy their coffee in the line behind them at, whatever shop you go to. It doesn't matter. Pick up trash in your neighborhood, do something kind. And I think that as far as one thing that it's done for me is that I've realized that my relationships with other people are what get me through life. When something is going wrong, it's really important that you have someone to talk to, someone that maybe has gone through something similar to you. And you will find that through those types of relationships, you can really thrive. It's very important to have a peer-to-peer connection with anything you go through in life.
It's such a great reminder, like a real true connection, a real true connection. Well, we feel that way with you, Michelle, and we appreciate the generosity of you sharing your story and your time. And I know it's not easy to recall all of this, but I can't help but think this is going to be incredibly impactful for our Smarter News community, and that feeling of energy and connection will be something that will be lasting for years to come. So thank you. Thank you for taking your time to share your story with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna.
Quick, concise, nonpartisan, Smarter News, a refuge from the storm. I'm Jenna. Thank you for choosing smarter.